On this episode of the Easy Prey podcast, I talk with John Graham-Cumming and Evan Johnson from Cloudflare about attacks on websites, distributed denial of service attacks, and how to protect your own website. If you want to keep your website up and running without skipping a beat, this is a must-listen episode. John is a British software engineer and the current CTO at Cloudflare. Evan is a product security manager at Cloudflare. Cloudflare provides services that increase the security and performance of over 26 million internet properties around the world, from individual blogs to governments to Fortune 500 companies. I'm your host, Chris Parker, and this is the Easy Prey podcast. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you coming on the podcast today and to be able to talk about what Cloudflare offers. I want to give guys a little background about both the listeners and you guys of how I ended up ultimately becoming a Cloudflare customer. I run whatismyipaddress.com, and I've run that site for a few weeks ago. It'll be 20 years now.
Wow. Wow.
Back from the early days of the internet, pre-Google,
yeah.
Back in the Alta Vista days.
Mm-hmm.
And Lycos, oh my goodness. And so it really totally started as a hobby, and over the years became a side hustle, kind of a side gig, and ultimately became my full-time occupation. And as it became earning more and more money, the need for better performance became an issue for me, and the need to be able to keep the site up 24/7 and not have to deal with outages became bigger and bigger for me. And one of the things I originally started doing was back when AWS launched CloudFront. I used them for CDN, which is Content Delivery Network, in order to get my static assets closer to my end users around the world, so that they can have better performance on the site. But one of the issues I did run across was when Lizard Squad, which was a hacking group, launched a denial of service tool that was open and available to the world. And I started seeing consistent 50 megabit denial of service attacks against my website. And I don't think it was necessarily intentionally, we don't like Chris, we don't like whatismyipaddress.com, but just kind of that playing, well, I wonder if this service really works and I can take down this site.
Yeah.
and they did a good job. I was on a fairly low-end router initially, and so 50 megabits would saturate the router, the website would go down, my money would go down. I'm like, okay, this is not a good answer. And so I worked with the co-location facility that I was working with, and we swapped out the router, and I'd see 100 megabit attacks, 200 megabit attacks, and the router could absorb it. My servers would get a little bit sloshy, and databases would get overwhelmed. But then in 2015 or so, I started getting pretty much sustained 500 megabit denial of service attacks. I think I even hit at one point, I have a record of about 650 megabit denial of service attack. And for anyone who kind of an idea how people work, most people probably have a 100 megabit connection at home internet. So that's basically if you're watching a whole bunch of simultaneous 4K streams, and it just overwhelms everything from the network hardware to the servers and all that kind of stuff. And at that point, it was like, okay, I've got to do something different. This is just not, this is not something I want to do. This is not my expertise trying to protect against this stuff. And so I ultimately ended up looking at Cloudflare because you guys have a great offering of services that happen to work really well for me and able to kind of lower the threshold of what hits my servers. And so that's kind of my history of how I've been working with Cloudflare. And I wanted to kind of talk with you guys and find out, like, what are some of the risks that Cloudflare helps website owners protect against? Obviously, I was talking about denial of service attacks, but what other kind of things that website owners should be aware of that they need protection against?
Well, I would say something about the denial of service thing, which is kind of interesting, which is, you were getting attacked for no good reason. Right? Yeah. People were just attacking you for the hell of it. And that's really pretty common, actually, that, people get online and someone just decides to try and knock you offline. It's kind of online vandalism, which is sort of part of the reason why we made DDoS mitigation free, because we just saw so many people get hit by, what were in the big scheme of things, relatively small attacks. They weren't going to end up on the news about it, but they took websites offline and hurt small businesses and hurt people with local blogs and services like yours. So actually, DDoS is surprisingly common, no matter who you are. So, it definitely, if you do have something online, get some service like a Cloudflare type thing to protect you, because it is really important.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that also happened is, even I think it was after I was working with you guys, I actually got several extortion emails basically saying, "Hey, if you don't pay up, $50,000 in Bitcoin, we're going to launch a gigabit sustained DDoS attack against you for the next, for the next 30 days. Have fun and pay up." Oh, and by the way, you can't respond to this email. So it's like, okay, what do I do? And call in and say, "Hey, should I worry about this?" And the answer is no.
No,
we'll absorb it.
We shouldn't worry about it. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So what are some of the other things that we should be worrying about as website operators?
Well, Evan, you run some websites and things. What do you worry about?
Yeah, so there's lots of things to worry about. Everything from like OWASP top 10 type vulnerabilities, basic SQL injections are still a big problem in the world. Cross-site scripting issues. There's all sorts of like just basic OWASP top 10 type issues. Logic issues are something that website, like people running complex services with complex backends and lots of business logic, they have to worry about logic flaws, which are difficult to spot, and you need to be able to find those as a attacker. It's challenging, but usually the impact is quite big. So just an example that comes off the top of my head is there's been issues in the past with like race conditions and gift cards, because this is the exact type of thing that is a logic issue where you can potentially use a gift card twice if you use it really fast. And so that the impact of that is like real dollars and very tangible. And so you have to be careful about that type of thing. But one of the things that I am starting to recommend to people, and I'm putting my marketing hat on a little bit, is moving more and more of their application to the edge with Workers. Actually with a product that we offer called Cloudflare Workers, where you can actually run your application at the edge. Actually has real security benefits too, because you have a distributed application. It's that much harder to DDoS. And I've been recommending that to a lot of website operators as well.
And I assume that also gives you the added benefit of anything that I'm monitoring on my own servers is just connectivity with you guys, as opposed to, is this a legitimate user? Should I be responding to this query? I can really limit who I'm interacting with, so to speak.
The big benefit is not every application is like perfect use case for Cloudflare Workers today, but things that are super high throughput, lots of requests, and like, what's my IP address could be a very good, without too much knowledge of the back end going on. What's my IP address type of website would be a good kind of Workers candidate. And the big benefit there is there's no back-end server to overwhelm. It just moves the application to all of our servers.
That's a really neat solution to keep the hosting costs significantly down and the CPU cycles down substantially. I know that's one of the things that can hit a lot of companies is just maintaining everything that has to be there to keep sites up and running.
Totally.
Especially maintaining it for peak times, right? So one of the issues is, how do you scale? You suddenly get popular, right? So somebody mentions what's my IP address on Reddit, and suddenly you've got an influx of traffic. I mean, we have a huge amount of capacity globally, and so it's quite easy for us to scale something like that and deal with it. So it's great to have something scalable like that and not worry about your elastic load balancer or how much you're going to pay Amazon to run the damn thing, now that you become successful, because, our goal is not to extract extra money from you. So,
yeah, I mean, that I've definitely had issues where I've been mentioned in the news in the early days. And when I was running, silly me running it out of my house and, oh gosh, the servers just can't keep up with the traffic and it just becomes totally unfeasible. But being able to hand that off to you guys would definitely relieve that stress.
Yep.
So I know you're talking about SQL injection, and that's a pretty common issue that anyone who has a kind of a public-facing database application has to deal with. How much of protection do you guys offer for SQL injection? I don't know how you necessarily quantify protection against SQL injection, but are you able to strip out the vast majority of stuff that might hit the servers?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the WAF, right? This is what does that, which is the Cloudflare WAF has a whole bunch of rules. We use the OWASP CRS, so the sort of standard rules for doing this stuff. And the really big thing is, unless somebody has really got it in for you and has decided that they're going to attack you because they've decided you're the enemy in some way, what they're going to be doing is using automated tools to scan. And so what you really want to do is limit the ability of that scanner to even see something, and then they won't bother. They'll just move on, because a lot of what's happening with attacks on the internet is there's like this background radiation of people just scanning to see what's vulnerable, right? And if they find something vulnerable, they'll hack it. And it's not that they particularly chose you. It's just that you happen to not have patched something, or, have not done a prepared statement in SQL and all that kind of stuff. And so I think you can protect a lot with a WAF, because you just eliminate this huge swathe of people who just go around scanning for vulnerable applications. And then if somebody really comes after you, well, then hopefully we can protect against that too. But then you're talking about a really persistent attacker who's going to try and find the soft underbelly of your application and find a way in.
Yeah, and I think you always have to, anyone who has a database should always prepare for, I don't want to say the eventuality, but the contingency of, okay, if you do get your database breached, what are your legal obligations on dealing with that? And, for me, who's someone who, it's just my internal data and logs and stuff like that. I'm not putting HIPAA data. I'm not putting medical records at risk. I'm not putting bank account numbers at risk. But if someone is storing more personally identifiable information, they really need to be able to have a contingency of like, okay, if my database does get compromised, one, how can I recover it? And two, what are my legal obligations of notification and things like that?
One of the big things with the WAF to mention is, if you're a security team, I come from the mindset of I'm part of a security team, and a lot of times we'll discover security issues in our systems. And so the WAF is great that if we discovered, or if somebody using our WAF discovers a SQL injection in their website, they may go to one of their engineers, and the engineer says, it's going to take me 3 weeks to fix this. And so instead of having to wait that 3 weeks, the security team can use the WAF and make a custom rule to with our firewalling product to block something really quickly. So that's really one of the other big benefits of the WAF, because sometimes you discover an issue and you want it mitigated instantly, and 3 weeks doesn't cut it.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely something I have seen on my site. Is there's something that I can fairly easily identify, not necessarily as a database intrusion attempt or things like that. I don't necessarily want to publicly disclose what some of the attacks are that I've seen, but I have been really amazed that whether I using your API to update a rule or going to the website and creating the rule there, that I can create a rule to protect myself against something that I'm seeing, and it's live within seconds. And I don't have to, okay, let me put this in a support queue. Let me, reach out to an engineering team, whether it's an internal team or an external team, and then it has to go through, 16 levels of approval. And it's really kind of neat that hey, I'm seeing this issue. I can identify it, and then I could do something to have it blocked almost immediately.
Right. I mean, that's one of our key sort of internal technologies. We have this thing called Quicksilver, which is our distributed key value store globally. And it's there to make those changes really fast for you. So if you make a configuration change, a rule change, add a DNS record, we should be able to push it out to the entire world, actually, usually in about half a second globally. It's really, really fast.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you can do that kind of stuff. The other thing I would say about the WAF that's really important is that one of the things we've observed is that when a new CVE comes out with some vulnerability, especially if it's in a web-based thing, attackers are going to start scanning for that very quickly. And very quickly is hours to like single digit days. It's incorporated into the latest scanning tools. And this actually creates a really big problem for people because everyone knows they should patch. And even the best organizations, which are like, yeah, we've got a patch schedule, we're going to patch. It's really hard to patch fast enough. Yeah. And so actually having a WAF give you some breathing room to actually go and patch the backend systems is really valuable. So I think, in general, WAFs are something that everybody should have one. It's an extra layer which can really, really help.
And for people who are not technical, WAF, it's a web application firewall. It's a rule set that you can put in place to protect against known factors.
Yeah.
Almost like antivirus for your website, where known signatures that are bad.
Yeah.
And I assume that's really important with so many people. Was a third of the internet is running on a third of the websites out there are running on WordPress. That if there's a core function of WordPress that has a vulnerability, for me, or, for anyone who's, running their little home website, they might be checking for plugin updates and WordPress updates once a week, maybe if they're lucky every couple of days. Whereas I assume that you guys, as soon as you're aware of a vulnerability,
it applies to WordPress. It applies all over the place. Any piece of software you're using, it's likely there's going to be updates. I mean, your iPhone gets updates, right? So there's going to be updates all over the place. So yeah, WAFs are really helpful for web applications, no matter what the technology.
Kind of an interesting question. So what are some risks that websites face that you guys don't protect against? I'm not trying to put you on the spot and make you look bad. I have a couple things in mind that I'm thinking of. But what are some of the things that like Cloudflare or one of your competitors just can't protect against?
Well, I mean, we don't protect against email, right? We don't look at like stuff that comes in your email. So, if you click on a bad link in your personal email, I'm sorry, we can't protect you from that. So that's a very different world from us. We're fundamentally protecting stuff that's coming over the web, and in most instances, that's going to websites or APIs are the big things. We don't specifically protect against ransomware, right? You mentioned getting somebody saying, hey, you got to pay us all this kind of money. Obviously, we can protect against the consequences where someone DDoSes you or something like that. But, if you're thinking about malware on your computer in your office, that's slightly different from our business. But if you connect it to the public internet and you provide a service or a website, yeah, we can protect that.
Yeah. One of the things I was specifically thinking of was, like poor password management. If you've got a WordPress site, you've got a half a dozen people who have access to it, you guys can't really protect against people who have poor password management where they've used, password 123 everywhere on the planet. And someone comes in and just logs into, Bob's account who has administrator access.
Yeah, I mean, if your password is that bad and it appears in a password dump, then yes, if somebody just comes in and just logs straight in, and then it's not something we're going to directly protect against. We do protect against the kind of credential stuffing attacks we see where people are trying out long lists of usernames and passwords to break into stuff. So we have this product called Bot Management, which helps a lot with that kind of thing. So that sort of stuff. But yeah, do use a good password and do have two-factor authentication everywhere because that stuff does help. Yes.
Yeah. And that's kind of one of the things. What I really wanted to mention was, there is no panacea, one product, one service that's going to protect you across everything that you ever do in your life. You still need to practice common sense and do things on your own part and not assume that, oh, well, I've got this service. They'll take care of everything. And I don't have to worry about anything in my life.
Yeah, well, I mean, I suspect even if you have an alarm on your house, you do lock the front door. So yes, there's definitely things you should do.
Yes, absolutely. So what are some of the other benefits that Cloudflare can offer website owners in addition to like the security features that we've already talked about?
Well, hopefully we make it faster, right? So we offer this thing called a CDN, caching, where we take the content that is static on a website and we move it to 200 cities all over the world. And so wherever people are visiting your website, you should be able to get it from somewhere really close. And, the reason that matters is that the speed of light is fixed, unfortunately. And if you go a long way, the speed of light really messes you up. So I was in Australia last week, and Australia is really far away. And some websites felt really laggy. And that was not because the internet was bad in Australia, just because it was a long way away. So, moving things closer really matters. So that caching CDN stuff is really, really important. And then Evan was just talking about Cloudflare Workers. Evan, tell us more about Cloudflare Workers, just so that people understand what that's all about compared to caching.
Oh, yeah. I'm a huge fan of Workers. It's a way to execute code at the edge, at our edge and our 200 points of presence around the globe. And you can do caching with Cloudflare Workers. I believe there's an API to cache things at our edge, but you can also store objects and store information at our edge as well. And so it's really great for really read-heavy operations and moving an application out closest to where people are. And so I've built my personal website on it, and I thought it was a great developer experience. And we're actually using them pretty heavily on our security team right now to kind of do some basic processing and some basic tooling to help all of our developers at Cloudflare ship more secure code. So we actually use Workers to look at all of the code that our developers are writing and leaving helpful comments on their PRs if we see on their pull requests, and telling them if there's anything that we think could be improved about it. So it's super flexible and really easy to write since you write it in JavaScript.
That's really cool. So one of the things that I was noticing, and I actually often caution people against, or hey, you got to look at this a little extra carefully, is when companies are offering services for free, that you have to say, well, okay, if you're not paying for this service, are you the service? And I know that Cloudflare offers free service, the free DDoS protection service. So how can you guys provide that service for free to users?
Well, I mean, I think your point is a good one, right? Which is if a company's what it's offering is completely free, then they are making money some other way. But the important thing with Cloudflare is we actually offer a paid service, right? We have a very, very large number of paying customers who are paying for this whole thing. So, if you're using our free service, then you're not the product there, right? You're being supported by the people who are paying for the service. And the reason you are interesting to us is many of those small customers paying us nothing end up being paying customers. They get used to the product, they love it, and they say, right, now there are some extra services Cloudflare provides that are not in the free tier, and I'm going to start paying for them. So it might be, Workers, maybe $5 a month on Workers, or it might be, I really want the WAF, so I'm going to start paying for a pro plan, or etc. So we're a freemium model, and we have a huge number of, paying customers all the way from the sort of $5 a month type folks up to very, very, very big household names. So yeah, you don't need to be afraid of that. And the other side of it to think about is just following the money again, which is our customers are people, like you have a website, right? Where you have a business on the web. The data that passes through that is your visitors is your data, right? So we don't think of that as our data to then exploit, to turn into ads or sell to some shady people. We think of that as your data kind of in our care. And so what we will do with it is we will analyze it so we can provide you with analytics, like you've seen in your dashboard, how many visits I've had and all that kind of stuff. And we'll look for attacks, right? So we use it for the cybersecurity stuff to say what new attack types are coming. Is his website under attack? Should we rate limit him? All that kind of stuff. But fundamentally, we're just not in the business of, we'll do something creepy with data, because actually it would destroy the business which we have, which is very successful. And we went public last year. So we would actually shoot ourselves in the foot, or maybe even in the head, if we started doing something creepy with people's data.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. That's how it works, and they're able to offer a service for free to people who may very well not be in the position to be able to afford. Well, probably very few people can afford the enterprise service. I mean, corporations can afford it, but people who are just trying to figure out, how do I have a web presence? How do I get myself out there? How do I start marketing my products and my services? Them having a free solution is a great opportunity to kind of get their foot in the door, have a little bit of peace of mind, knowing that, well, even if I'm not super fast at patching stuff, Cloudflare's got my back. Yeah. Not that I don't have to patch, but.
Right. That's right. And doing it very inexpensively, either free or one of our cheap plans, it's a very good way to get a level of protection that, frankly, our DDoS protection, that was something that was only available to giant companies. and we give it away for free because we built a network and a service that's capable of doing that. And I think that, we have this mission, which is to help build a better internet, which sounds a bit hokey sometimes, but we really believe in it. And we think that, why was it okay that you were getting DDoSed? It wasn't okay. You shouldn't have had to deal with that. And, you could not have gone to one of the big DDoS providers and paid them because it would have just bankrupted you.
Yeah.
So, we really changed that by the way in which we built our service. And there's just no need to be paying a fortune for this stuff. So come try it out.
Yep, and I can attest that their service has been a total lifesaver for me. That what would have been sleepless nights here and there are definitely nights where I've gotten a good night's sleep knowing that I don't have to worry about this stuff.
That's great.
I guess there was one question of maybe like best practices. So if someone has been, they have not been a Cloudflare customer, and for whatever reasons, they're actually an intentional target of denial of service attacks and things like that. Is there like a best practice in transitioning to Cloudflare in that if I don't move my backend servers, they're still out there, they're still potentially vulnerable just because what's publicly facing is now behind Cloudflare? Is there a best practice for, if there is a pattern of ongoing attacks, should you move your backend where you're hosting your website at the same time that you move to Cloudflare?
Evan, you deal with a lot of this stuff.
If they're that persistent, then totally that's a good idea. But also, best practices, I think you mentioned the first one earlier. I would make sure that you have a strong password on your account and two-factor authentication, because like Cloudflare, controls your DNS records and it controls so much about your website. It's very important to have good hygiene with your Cloudflare account. And then with your actual backend servers, you want to make sure that you orange cloud things. By default, we refer to it as orange clouding internally, where by default, you don't have to worry about this as you onboard, but you want to make sure that Cloudflare is actually proxying the requests. And so we refer to orange clouding as Cloudflare is seeing the requests and they're being proxied through our network. And it's configurable in our dashboard, in the DNS dashboard, either orange clouding, or we refer to it as gray clouding if they're not going through, if the requests aren't passing through our network. And then we have features to make sure that the security between our edge and your servers is secure. So authenticated origin pools is a great way to make sure that the requests that are reaching your servers are coming from Cloudflare. And we offer IPs on cloudflare.com/IPs for you to put in your IP firewall rules to make sure that the IP packets are only coming from Cloudflare. So it really is a spectrum. We offer a bunch of different security services. So like maybe they stop just when you onboard on Cloudflare, but you can take it as far as you want and be as maximal with your security as well. And I believe now with our newest product, Magic Transit, or one of our newest products, Magic Transit, if you have IP space, we can take over that IP space and become your network.
Yeah. Yep.
That's right. Really true. So what's the Magic Transit product? I've not heard of this before.
Well, basically, so instead of you advertising your IP space, whatever IPs that you have in your company, we will do it for you. And then the traffic will come to us and we can do the DDoS scrubbing and all the other services that we provide. And then we can pass the good traffic back onto you through some tunneling process, typically GRE. And that's actually really good for, say, larger companies which might own a large block of IPs. They get a lot of different sorts of attacks against all sorts of infrastructure. And rather than just saying, hey, I just want to protect my websites or my APIs or something, they're just like, can you just protect everything? And then, particularly from DDoS, for example. And then, we can do that for them. And that can be used as an always on kind of thing, like we're always there, or it can be, I'm in trouble. They pull the big handle on the wall and suddenly we turn into them. So that really allows people to use, an existing IP infrastructure. Sometimes that's really important just from a policy perspective, that they want to use their own IPs, they want to use Cloudflare IPs. And sometimes it's important for legacy reasons where they might actually have stuff that's hard-coded for specific IPs and it's hard for them to change. So there's lots of reasons, and that's been, very, very successful product.
So I'll get really geeky because the network stuff really interests me. So does that means like you're basically acting as the ASN or the
Yes.
was it the BGP and announcing the IP space for it?
That's right. That's right. We announce space, the traffic comes to us, and then we typically have GRE tunnels set back up to the real the real service or the real network to actually pass the good traffic through. Yep.
Cool. That sounds really neat. So it's really neat that you offer everything from, I don't want to say vanilla services, but very end user, the everyday man services, all the way up to stuff that is extremely technical, way above my pay grade. And it's not just a one product fits all, where it's like, well, you have to like everything or nothing. Right. You have this wide stream of services that make sense for everybody.
Yeah. But what I would say is we definitely do that. But one of our key things is we try to take things that are complex and expensive and make them easy to use and cheap, and so that everybody gets access to all these really cool tools. So although we'll provide things that the largest companies in the world want, you'll find many of those features in our pay-as-you-go product. So it's no matter who you are, you should be getting access to this stuff, and that's really what the whole democratizing thing is all about.
Yeah, and I noticed that I think it was 2018 you guys launched 1.1.1.1 as a DNS and VPN services. Has that really taken off for you guys? Yeah.
It's absolutely huge. Yes. I mean, the 1.1.1 resolver is a public DNS resolver. It's the fastest there is, independently measured, not by us, partly because of the scope of our network, right? 200 cities worldwide, we can provide DNS from everywhere in the world. And then, last year we launched what's called Warp, which is our un-VPN. It's a way of securing the connection from your mobile phone to the Cloudflare network. So it doesn't matter where you're connecting to the internet, some random coffee shop somewhere, guest Wi-Fi in a company, at home, over 4G, whatever. We can secure that connection and make sure that everything is being handled securely and make you safer. So, and those things have taken off. They're absolutely huge. Yeah.
Definitely the privacy and security have very much come into people's awareness over the last few years, and that desire to I want to make sure no one's snooping on me and no one's kind of in between me and the websites that I'm visiting doing weird things to my traffic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people have really started to realize, that they're using the internet for absolutely everything from, banking to dating. And it really matters that they protect that and use things that are trustworthy. And it's just become, as much as we would lock our front door and close the windows when we go out, we're now thinking about, am I using secure websites? And is everything I'm doing secure and safe?
Yeah. So do you have any other last bits of advice for website operators before we sign off today?
Well, I always tell people, this is not necessarily just for website owners, but for everybody, which is if there is one password and two-factor you're going to use, it is on your personal email. Because if I can break into your personal email, I can probably reset the password on every other service you use under the sun. And so please, if you're sitting listening to this thinking, yes, I know I'm using my wife's maiden name as my password on my personal email, do not get up from your computer, go and fix that right now, because that's where it's just such a huge risk, and people don't think about it. So make sure it's unique, use two-factor auth, secure that first, and then you can work on it from there.
Yeah, I've definitely. I get lots of people coming to me saying, "Hey, I've lost access to my email account. What do I do?" And it's it gets very bad very quickly if that's the email address that you use for your banking, your retirement accounts, and all that kind of stuff. It can go south very, very quickly, unfortunately.
Yep.
So that is absolutely great advice. John, Evan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, it was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It's nice to chat about this stuff. And thanks for being a customer. I'm glad it works out so well for you. And it's funny, I think I vaguely knew you were a customer, but I must have used your service hundreds of times, thousands maybe.
Yeah.
That is one of the neat things of running the website is, I'll be at some event somewhere at some random thing is, well, what do you do? I run a website. What website? Nah, it's really techie. You probably haven't heard of it. Well, no. What is it? That's whatismyipaddress.com. Oh, you're the whatismyipaddress.com guy. Wow, that's amazing. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of weird.
I think everybody's been to that website in the world by now. It's
yeah. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Easy Pray podcast. If you found this episode helpful, share it with someone you know and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Notes and a transcript of this episode can be found at easypray.com/9. Have you been the victim of a scam, and are you interested in sharing your story with the Easy Pray audience? Head over to easypray.com/mystory to learn more.